Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages, to give perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We hope to add a new episode most Fridays at 9 a.m. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes. As a supporter, you will get a direct email link to Mike. In Season 5, we are making significant improvements and changes on an ongoing basis.
A note from the heart. Hello, dear listeners. I'm thrilled to share our passion project with you. Podcast that brings joy, knowledge, and inspiration. Creating it is a labor of love, even though it demands more time than I can easily spare. But hey, time isn't something that we can buy back, right? Now, here's where you come in, the unsung hero. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. 3 simple ways to support us. First, you can make a small monthly contribution. Visit our website, Open Forum in the Villages, Florida, and click on the supporter box. Even a humble $3 to $10 a month makes a difference. And guess what? You can cancel anytime, no strings attached, free and priceless. If your wallet is feeling a little light, no worries, you can still be a superhero. How? By rating our podcast. Give us those 5 shining stars or leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, every click, every review, every share, it all adds up. Help us reach more ears, touch more hearts, and keep the podcast humming along in 2024 and beyond. From the bottom of our podcasting hearts, thank you. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on.
If you have a book that you would like to turn into an audiobook, let us know via email to mike@rothvoice.com. Hope you enjoy today's show.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Dr. Craig Curtis. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Good. Dr. Curtis, you've been on the show before, and you're a long-term supporter of the show. I want to ask you a couple of questions today about the Alzheimer's disease epidemic in America. Would I be right when I characterize it as an epidemic?
You would be very close.
Yeah, it seems to affect elderly people first.
That's right. And one of the most important, I guess, aspects to the epidemic is that we currently have 60 million people in the United States over the age of 65. And in the next 30 years, we will have approximately 90 million people in the United States over the age of 65. So the incidence of Alzheimer's disease will indeed be rising.
So there have been a couple of updates or advances in Alzheimer's research and treatment since we last spoke. First, could you tell our listeners a little bit about the blood test that's been announced for Alzheimer's?
Sure. So in 2020, we had the world's first blood test cleared by the FDA to detect what we call plaques, which are made up of this protein called amyloid that builds up in the brain, which causes Alzheimer's disease. So that first blood test detected those plaques. But I would say it's accurate, but it's not accurate enough. And so scientists have been searching for better ways or better blood tests. And just in the last month, they published some data showing a new blood test that is possibly more accurate. And not only that, but it detects these problems prior to symptoms, it looks like, which will be very, very important for prevention.
On the treatment side of Alzheimer's, the new drug that was approved by the FDA that you talked about the last time you were here, could you tell us where we are on that drug?
Sure. So that drug is called Leqembi, and it was approved last July in 2023. And it was the world's first drug to show in over 18 months in approximately 2,000 people that it slowed the progression of Alzheimer's disease by approximately 25% over those 18 months.
So can you translate 25% into time?
Roughly 5 months gained in 18 months. So the theory is, and we don't know this is we're continuing to test, is that, well, if someone takes it for a longer period, does that mean they'll gain even more time? So those are answers still yet to be determined, although the data is pointing in that direction.
So it could be something like insulin, where once someone is on it, they really can't get off it, and it does delay.
No, we think that we're only going to need to treat patients for a limited amount of time to remove the amyloid, remove the plaque. Then they should start to slow the memory loss. So we feel like we need to get to that amyloid early and clear it out quickly, because the changes in cognition or the retaining of memory, there's a delay of approximately 1 year from when you clear out the plaque to when we start seeing actual slowing of the disease.
Okay, so someone would be on the drug for about a year.
Well, sometimes based on dosing, we might need to go a little longer. There are some newer medicines coming that looks like we might be able to clear out the plaque in as short as 6 months.
And those are going to be expensive, not covered by insurance.
Medicare has said they're going to start covering those medications.
Really?
Yes. Hopefully by the end of this year. The first thing they just announced a few months ago is they're going to start covering the cost of the PET scans. But the PET scans to detect amyloid are still very, very expensive. And I think Medicare is really hoping the blood test turns out to be what we think it can be. And we should know, matter of fact, there's a new blood test coming on the market in a few weeks that seems very, very accurate.
Is there a name to that new blood test?
There is a name. The company is called ALZPATH, ALZPATH.
So you'll be able to go into your local Quest Diagnostics for a blood test that they do once a year with your family physician and have that test added on?
Well, there's a couple of really important points you just brought up. Number one, family physician. And number two, can you just walk into Quest and get it? So they did just run a study where they showed that if we don't move these blood tests into primary care, in a couple of years, it could take 4 years to get a diagnosis and get treatment.
Wow.
If we're leaving this only to the specialists. So therefore, it was a study done by the RAND Corporation. And they said that if we can get these blood tests into the hands of primary care physicians, then we can cut that wait by many years.
And then the outcomes would be better if treatment starts earlier.
Exactly. We absolutely know that starting treatment earlier is better.
Okay. Let's talk for a few minutes about some of the things that people can do on their own to get better. I understand there have been some studies that talk about exercise and how that helps in brain health.
That's right. Some really fascinating research recently. So there was an article published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in January, so 1 month ago, January 2024. It was research done at UCLA and Washington University, where they looked at 10,000 people. They looked at the brain volume on MRI scans.
So 10,000 is a significantly large sample.
That is a very large sample. Exactly. Good research. So they looked at brain volume in those aged 18 to 97 and correlated that with how much exercise those people performed over the prior couple of weeks. And those with greater than 25 minutes a week of moderate exercise had larger brain volumes.
So you don't need to go to the gym every day for an hour or even 3 days a week. You need to exercise at least 25 minutes per week. And it was moderate exercise.
That's right. According to this study, the moderate exercisers did the best. And those are people that essentially are able to huff and puff while they work out. So get the heart rate up a little bit, get the breathing a little heavy, sort of like a brisk walk. You didn't need to go to the hop on your bike and ride as fast as you can. You didn't
for 25 minutes every other day.
That's right. And you didn't need to jump in the pool and swim laps as fast as you can. And you didn't need to go for a run.
So if I jumped in the pool and swam laps for 10 minutes a day, 3 days a week, that would probably cover me.
You would have a larger brain at the end of it. Yes.
And larger brain means from a brain health perspective.
It means a healthier brain. Just like if Arnold Schwarzenegger walked through this door and took you to the gym every day for the next 6 months and you lifted weights, your muscles would probably get a little bigger. Yeah. Well, if you exercise...
I'd have a lot of aches and pains.
Right. But you would have bigger muscles. And if you do this moderate exercise for 25 minutes a week, you will have a larger brain, according to this study.
And larger brain means a lower likelihood that Alzheimer's or dementia will set in on you?
Well, we don't know that for sure, but what we can say is that a larger brain probably indicates that your brain is healthier, and those people tend to live longer.
Okay. So even people who like to read a lot and are very sedimentary if they get out and exercise for 25 minutes a week in a moderate level, will benefit from just that.
That's right. The study, primarily you need at least 10-minute blocks of exercise. So 10 minutes. Don't take 25 minutes and divide it by 7 days and get 4 minutes a day. That won't work. But in 10-minute blocks. So generally, like you said at the beginning of this, that 3 10-minute sessions a week appears to give you a larger brain.
Okay, so here in the villages, we tell people to walk around a couple of blocks twice or 3 times a week, and that will dramatically help.
That's right. Not a stroll, though. You don't want to go and look at the birds and
you want to
stroll.
Move.
You want to move and get your heart rate up and get your breathing rate up as well.
Okay, so not quite at the race walk speed level, but just moderate race walking will do it for you.
I say a brisk walk is what I like to say.
Okay, good. The other thing that people might be able to do is modify their diet. Can you tell us what the latest research is on diet and Alzheimer's?
Yes, so there's been a lot of talk about diet and Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of data published that those that follow a Mediterranean type diet or a MIND diet, which I'll cover here in a minute, essentially have larger brain volumes, have slower rates of memory loss as they age, and might have more resistance to developing Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia.
Okay, so many of us are familiar with a Mediterranean diet and what that means. The other term you used was a MIND diet.
Right. So the Mediterranean diet traditionally is difficult to follow for Americans. It's based on whole grains, 2 or 3 servings a day, fresh fruits and vegetables, green leafy vegetables, multiple servings a day, beans, berries, nuts, legumes, obtaining protein from fish and eggs and chicken, and only having red meat once a month and very little sweets. Right.
Once a month.
Exactly. So that's a traditional.
I feel like I'm in trouble now.
No, don't be. So there's some good news here. So approximately 15 years ago, researchers at Rush University in Chicago and Harvard University looked at the Mediterranean diet and said, well, how can we make this more for Americans? What can we do? And so they came up with the MIND diet, MIND, for Mediterranean Interventional Neurodegenerative Delay Diet. Let's stick with MIND diet. I think
that's much easier to say.
And it's not a diet, it's really more of a lifestyle. And essentially, it converts the Mediterranean diet into a much more accessible diet for Americans. So you're allowed some pastries and some more sweets and some more red meat. But they really, really still attempt to get you to follow the fresh fruits and vegetables and berries and beans, nuts, legumes, etc. And as much chicken as you can, and fish and eggs for protein. And they really want you to avoid fried foods fried in oil specifically. They want you to avoid heavy use of alcohol. 1 to 2 drinks a day, we'll talk about in a few minutes, seems to provide some benefit in a couple of areas, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And so the MIND diet is much easier to follow for Americans and for what we're used to eating. And then the other thing is that MIND diet, that type of eating can be, you can eat other foods from other, I would say ethnic foods. For example, you can eat Mexican food and still follow a MIND type lifestyle. You can eat Turkish food and still follow the MIND lifestyle. You can still eat American food and follow a MIND type diet or lifestyle. So there's a lot of flexibility to it as well.
You kind of indicated that the MIND diet includes sugar.
Well, there is a little bit of sugar. We don't want you to take in extra sugar, but there will be natural sugar in a lot of the fruits that you would eat. Sure. Right? And
you said pastries.
Well, good pickup. Yeah. So it allows you to. We know that if we try to put people on this restrictive diet, they're essentially not going. They're going to fail, or they're not going to do well when they attempt to do that. So yes, we're being a little more generous, and we don't want to live forever, or do you?
Well, that's a heck of a good question, and I've always answered it for myself. I want to live as long as I'm healthy.
Right.
Okay. I don't like the idea of, becoming a vegetable someplace. So,
Well, then eat your vegetables.
oh, I love the vegetables. Okay. And I'm lucky because my wife hates cooking with oil. She always burns herself. And, when we were first married, she told me no fried foods.
Smart wife. Although one of my favorite foods in the world is fried chicken. So I can't, but I just don't do it that often. I try to maybe once every 3 or 4 months.
That's something I used to love as a kid, and I just can't eat it now.
Yeah.
I'd rather have an eggplant, and I think that's a wonderful food.
And you know what? As you sort of start to follow these types of lifestyles, you do start to sort of forget what you used to love, and you can find new things that you love, just like what you said about eggplant.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out that the data, the studies that have been done using the MIND diet are significant studies, meaning that one of the recent studies just published a few months ago actually looked at autopsy data from people that followed a MIND diet. And the beautiful thing was, so let's say, for example, there are 21 meals in a week. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you were able to change about half of those, so 10 of those meals a week, let's say you chose to eat salads and more green leafy vegetables and olive oil and whole wheat toast, etc. If you did that with about 10 of those meals a week, you can increase the size of your brain, autopsy proven. So otherwise, these people had bigger brains. So once again, we're kind of back to the bigger brain
that's a good idea.
But this was autopsy proven, I believe, in approximately 500 autopsies. So you don't need to follow it with 21 meals a week, like religiously every day. This was people that just followed the diet to what we call moderate adherence, approximately half the meals a week.
Has there any research been done about fasting diets where they say don't eat anything for 16 hours?
Yeah, so that's been really popularized over the last couple of years. So a lot of the data comes from animals, not from humans at this point. And so we knew the world really first found out about it when they took mice and they calorie restricted mice. And this was for their whole life. This was just calorie restriction on a daily basis. And those mice outlived their peers approximately double. And this was, I think, around 20 years ago, they figured this out. And so then they started to look at fasting and 16-hour fasts, et cetera, where you just eat regular one day and then you might skip breakfast and lunch the next day and only eat dinner. So the theory is that it promotes a reduction in inflammation in the body. We're constantly fighting inflammation, whether it's in the body or the brain. It promotes autophagy, which is the removal of old cells. So we have these old cells in our body that we want to get rid of. And some of that is true in animal data, but I don't think we know enough about in humans yet how helpful it may be. I think it's okay if you want to follow fasting. I don't have any problem with it when my patients talk about it, but I do think that you should do it once again in moderation.
I heard it helped in lowering your resistance to insulin, because every time you eat something, your body produces insulin. And if you don't eat and fast, that insulin is not produced, so that it helps you in prevention of diabetes.
That is true so far in animal studies. And in humans, we think it's true because people that fast do tend to have a lower weight. So therefore, overall, they're putting their less stress on their body as far as insulin and diabetes.
So in the time we have left, Dr. Curtis, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do over at K2 Research?
We're clinical researchers, which means we study Alzheimer's disease and prevention of Alzheimer's disease. Matter of fact, one of the big studies we're involved in right now is one of the country's largest prevention studies. So this is a study partially funded by the NIH, the U.S. government, and it's being coordinated through at Harvard University and University of Southern California. They're the coordinating centers. And there are approximately 80 research sites around the country. And what we're looking for are people over the age of 60 that would like to have a PET scan to see if they're developing amyloid. And these are people that have no symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. They don't have any memory loss, no cognitive complaints at this time. And if we find amyloid in their brain, that is the number one risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's disease. That's what we find in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease. And so the study will run 4 years where they can get the medicine that was just FDA approved. They get that or a placebo. And we're going to follow them for 4 years to see if removing that amyloid before they get dementia will actually halt the progression or stop people from developing Alzheimer's disease. So that is a really, really important study and a really, really one of our main focuses at K2, at my research center. And then we're also looking for patients that have memory problems. We're performing regular research, what I would say regular research trials on patients that have memory problems. We're trying to investigate what's causing that memory problem, if it is indeed amyloid, which would indicate that the patient probably has early Alzheimer's disease. And we're trying different medications to try to remove that amyloid and slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And once again, we've already had one home run in the field, and we're looking at newer, more advanced medications that we think might be much better.
So, Dr. Curtis, what do you think the future looks like, Alzheimer's treatment here in America?
I think the future looks very good. I think that these blood tests are going to make a significant difference in our ability to detect someone who's developing Alzheimer's disease before symptoms. And let me take a step back and just cover that for a second. So we know that a person who develops memory loss due to Alzheimer's disease, we know that that disease actually started approximately 2 decades or 20 years prior. We know that amyloid starts building up for approximately 20 years, 15 to 20 years, which then initiates other brain cells to die off, essentially, which leads to Alzheimer's disease. So we're trying to remove that amyloid prior to that so we can prevent Alzheimer's disease. And we're also attempting to, once somebody already has the cognitive changes or memory symptoms, we're trying to figure out if reducing that amyloid really slows the disease. So we now have, of course, the world's first medicine on the market that is slowing Alzheimer's disease by removing amyloid from the brain. And we're looking at newer, more advanced forms of those medications that remove the amyloid much more quickly in a matter of months. So that's very exciting.
So if one of our listeners want to go to one of your seminars that you put on regularly, how do they make a reservation to do that?
The easiest way is to go to our website, which is www.craigcurtismd.com, or call our office at 352-500-5252.
Thanks, Dr. Curtis.
Thank you, Mike.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, and major supporter Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024, all rights reserved.